Okay, we're back. So while our wine is boiling, we are going to look at this book, Tourney Cooking, Recipes to Enjoy at Outdoor Events. So we're going to turn to the very back of the book, and today we are going to make two medieval spice mixes. The first one is called powdered forte, and the second one would be powdered deuce. Both of these are used extensively throughout this book. And if you guys want, we can go ahead and make other recipes down the line from this book. But we're going to need the spice mixes to do so. So, the first one, powdered forte, we are going to need 1/2 of a teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. So, there we go. We're going to grind our black pepper till we get 1/2 teaspoon. And making these spices is going to get a little messy because we are going to crush some ourselves. Okay, let's see. I also have my measuring spoon. So 1/2 teaspoon. Let's see how much we got. Perfect. Okay. 1/2 teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper. All right. Next ingredient. 1½ teaspoons of ginger. And you're going to want to use dried ginger. So, 1/2 teaspoon. 1/2 teaspoon. 1/2 teaspoon. Alright, so those are 1½ teaspoons of ginger. Mix that around a bit. Next, we're going to use 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Now there's different types of medieval cinnamon. I'm just going to use the Great Value ground cinnamon brand. There's Ceylon cinnamon and cassia cinnamon. This is probably cassia, which they would not have used. They probably would have used the Ceylon, but we're going to use what we have on hand today. Actually, I can probably just... Yeah, there we go. So 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. Alright, the next thing, we have 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, 1/2 teaspoon of grains of paradise. Now, if you can't get a hold of grains of paradise, it says here, if you can't find the grains, use a 50-50 mix of ginger and black pepper. And then that is the final ingredient. So what we're going to do, get our mortar and pestle here. Use a 1/2 teaspoon. Let's fill up my 1/2 teaspoon here. Alright. Okay, so there's 1/2 teaspoon of whole cloves, which we're going to grind. And then my grains of paradise. I don't see. These are my cloves. There they are. Open. Where do they open? There we go. Actually, I haven't opened these yet. Teaspoon of grains of paradise. And now we're going to grind these very finely. Now if you don't have this, a spice grinder would work just fine. But since I have it, and we have time, since we're waiting for everything to come to a boil, we're going to sit and we're going to grind for a bit. delicious. Grains of paradise are one of my favorite spices to use in period recipes. I believe we've even used some grains of paradise in a mead once. Now we're almost there. I think the hardest part is grinding up the cloves. You definitely want to grind the cloves. And we're not up to a boil yet, so we may have time to make a second. Okay. It's almost there. It is going to be an arm workout if you do it by hand. I think we're there. Mix it up. Alright, so this brown mixture that we see here, it smells pretty strong. You definitely smell the grains and the cloves, and the ginger really comes through strong with that. And that one was the powder fort. Alright, so we'll do that. The powder fort. Now our next one that we're going to be making, powdered deuce. Now this has very, very similar ingredients. So there's actually only one difference. Besides the measurements. The measurements are different, but there's also one extra ingredient. So in this one, we're going to start with 4 teaspoons of ginger. So get the ginger back out. And I'm going to wipe off my spoon. So, oops, that's the half teaspoon. All right, 4 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 teaspoons of ginger. This is going to be very gingery. All right, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. All right, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And now this is where we have the different ingredient. Half a teaspoon of sugar. We're actually going to add sugar to it. Here's our sugar. Okay, so let's mix this around for a second. Now we're not done with this one, but I am going to pour it into my clear container and scrape out all that ginger. Now usually you would clean your mortar and pestle between scrapings, but we're using the exact same ingredients, so it's not a huge deal. Alright, so now we need to grind again. Half teaspoon of cloves, half teaspoon of grains of paradise. Again. Teaspoon of cloves. Half teaspoon of grains of paradise. And if you are looking for period spices, my spice sage. That's where I've gotten a lot of my spices before. I haven't ordered from them in a long time, But I've always had really good success with their spices. Now, most of the time I just get my spices from the Asian market or the Indian market. But if there's something I cannot find, my spice sage. Alright, so we are going to grind these just like we did a minute ago. And of course this is the last part of the spices, and then once I grind this, we will go check on our dandelions and see how they are going. Now, next week I had planned to use some of these spice mixes. A recipe that I found in this book would be pears and red wine, and it uses one of these spice mixes. I'll have to look and see which one it uses exactly. Alright, there we go. Looking good. Any comments? Anything? Anybody watch it? Yep.
Shows one.
Oh, alright. Oh, did you go ahead and share it to the other groups and stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now it's all ground up. We're just going to add it to the list. Right. So that brown mixture again is powdered deuce. So try to remember, and I'll put those in a jar and label them later so I don't forget which is which. Although we did make more of the powdered deuce because it called for a lot more ginger. Alright, so now the recipe I had planned for these would, Platina's roasted carrots. It calls for the powder forte. And the one next week that I'm thinking I could use with this would be the Wardenies and syrup, which is just pears and syrup. So next week, if I can get the pears and syrup, or the pears and wine, it's 1 16-ounce can of pear halves and light syrup, which actually I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use fresh pears. 1 cup of sweet red wine, 2 teaspoons cinnamon, or actually, you can use the powdered deuce for this one. You're also going to need vinegar and saffron. So we may be making that recipe and maybe the roasted carrots next week. But we made our spices this week, and I think our dandelions are boiling. So let's go check on that.